Well, in your perspective, how did the first one go? I'll go ahead and put up a quick poll question. What did you think of the first one? This is how I think thesis thinking, though, gets developed. It's about you being exposed to real life problems and me throwing you in and asking you questions. For some of you who are pretty type A, who like to get perfect grades and get everything right, this can be a bit frustrating because you're just being thrown into a situation and being told to do your best and guess, and then you're seeing what my answers were. But if we were in a classroom with enough dialogue to discuss this, maybe some of your answers would perhaps be better. And that's okay if the videos don't validate all of your opinions, because if you're sharpening your skills and seeing how somebody else addresses problems of ministry and develops thesis projects, then I think we're going to be doing okay. So let's go ahead and jump into our second context, and that is a community Christian school. Okay, so this is going to be our context, and remember what we're trying to do is we're trying to hear the backstory, think of questions that maybe we should ask, develop a hypothesis concerning the problem, and really be able to develop what do we really know, and how does that lead to me thinking of a discovery thesis project idea and an experimental one. Okay, so let's get ready to hear about context number 2. Community Christian School is a private Christian school that's been around for about 20 years and has about 250 students, and it's situated in a suburban part of town. This school services middle school and high schoolers, and they aim to feed both the mind and the soul. And so they offer chapel service. They 3 times a week there are Bible classes, and they hire only Christian staff. The school principal is not the founder. He has been around just for the last couple of years. But he is a former youth pastor with obviously the pedigree to be a principal as well, but just a real passion for students. The school has had steady numbers and appears to be doing in pretty good health otherwise. But there was a recent news scandal kind of all over the papers and in the news, and it's about a graduate from this school who got in trouble with the law, got arrested, drugs and alcohol and other problems, which then brought to light, this question of how are our graduates really doing? And this person who was arrested was somebody who went through the middle school program as well as the high school program and has been out of the program for the last few years. And them being arrested has really brought in some questions about how well are we preparing our graduates for the real world. The principal has also been noticing that many graduates who graduate from their high school program are not succeeding in college and post-college years. They've just begun to start tracking some of this information. A number of their graduates have either dropped out or not succeeded in college. Some of them have left the faith. And in general, when it comes to helping them apply for colleges, less than half of them are actually interested in applying to Christian schools. So for various reasons, this school is starting to question how well are we really doing at graduating formed Christian people from our school. And so this has become kind of the problem and opportunity. This incident in the news is bringing out this question of how well are we doing at actually graduating mature Christians who can, go into the world and not only make a difference, but stand on their own 2 feet. So that is our second context, and that's our problem or opportunity. And so the first step is still the same. What questions would you have about this ministry context? What more would you like to know? Well, a question I would have for this context would be, are there other private schools in this area, and how well are they doing? Are they experiencing similar things? Are there other Christian private schools like this who have a similar aim? Because maybe they don't actually know, again, a discovery thesis project idea of what is successful, graduation rates that, or spiritual metrics that follow these students to see What percent of students do continue in their faith? What percent should be pursuing Christian schools? Because it sounds like they don't really have an idea. They just are kind of alarmed by what they're finding. And so part of me wonders, are they measuring spiritual growth with some kind of metrics of their middle school and high schooler year over year? Are they measuring them when people graduate? Are they checking in on graduates who've gone on to college or chosen not to go on to college to see how they're doing? Do they have any sort of follow-up? Or, are they kind of just herding cattle through, and so they don't really even know? I also wonder I've heard about that they do things, like chapel, and that they have Bible classes. I would wonder if they do anything at the individual level. I'd wonder about the age of the staff who work there, and if the staff is really connected to the students. I'm really interested in just, to hear the students' perspective on the spiritual climate of this Christian school. I mean, I also would be curious to see what the staff would say, because sometimes people aren't saying it, but everybody knows it. Have we even asked the right people to figure out what some of the problems might be? So those would be some questions I would have. But based on the information that you know, what's your theory? What's your theory about what the problem is and what might need to be done? I'm asking you to kind of separate the theory from working on a discovery thesis project or an experiment one. Let's kind of just develop a theory. What would you say? It seems to me that I have two kind of preliminary theories. One is that they're disturbed by data. Somebody got arrested. And they're disturbed by data also about, graduates not succeeding at college or not staying in the faith. And so, in other words, it just seems that they are only a few little pockets of knowledge that they have that are leading to this inquiry. But it makes me wonder, there just might be a lack of data in general. Maybe the problem is far worse and has been going on for a long time, but they're just not tracking it. Meaning that they're not giving students an avenue to voice their satisfaction or dissatisfaction with their education or the spiritual climate of the school. I mean, I think that they maybe one of their real issues is they don't know. This is something that Leroy comes back to a lot in his classes, is that if you don't measure things, then you really don't know things. And so there's a sense in which maybe this school needs to learn a lot about measuring and measuring the spiritual climate of their school. Now, some of you might be wondering, like, well, where do you get tools for that? Well, that's later down the road. But to start with, maybe they need to increase their knowledge of the situation. Secondly, it just seems that there might be a lack of spiritual transformation, and there might be a lot of causes that we need to investigate. But that's my current theory, kind of just hearing this story and kind of looking at it and walking around. I have a hunch that there is a lack of spiritual transformation happening in the school, and I have a feeling that there's a lack of information or data for us to really stand on, and so it sounds like we need more information in general. But I think that we might know enough to propose a discovery thesis project. What would a discovery model look like? Well, I think one of the first preliminary ideas, and hopefully it's bubbling to the surface and quite obvious for the rest of you, is that they need to do some research with their graduates and with their current students. They need to send out some kind of mailer where people can give short answers, or maybe they need to send out multiple choice where people are describing the quality of the education, the quality of the chapel, the quality of the Bible classes, the availability of mentors, the depth of the community. They need to figure out where the problem is, and it doesn't sound like they really know. And so they might need to find out, how people are doing. So I could see this a couple of ways. I could see this, them going after graduates who've been gone for 2 to 3 years, or maybe that have been gone for 5 or 8 years, or really focusing on the seniors who've been at the school for more than 3 years to get their perspective. It sounds like they need to really learn what's going on and what the issues are. It sounds like they also might want to start tracking, because it doesn't seem that they are, the spiritual formation of their students. Is there any sort of metrics that they can show so that if, for example, they were putting in a lot of effort to forming students, but it wasn't working, would they know? Would they notice? Well, if you were measuring spiritual formation and all of a sudden it's not really yielding results, that year when you get your surveys back, you'd realize, oh, something's going on. We need to ask questions. We need to learn. We need to change. But if there's no measurement, would you really notice? Maybe this is a wake-up call. So yes, number one, trying to think of a investigative TP is that they need to figure out the spiritual health, and maybe they need to do that with the graduates or the current students. Number two is that they might need to start measuring it in general year over year. But a different kind of thesis project, a totally different idea, and remember there are always so many thesis projects in a problem of ministry. Another one would be maybe going to a very successful private school that they've been measuring their spiritual formation. They're putting out a lot of graduates who are going on to Christian schools, that they have some notable alumni who, are doing impressive or good things, and just go see what are they doing, what are the best practices, what are the methods, the principles, what do they believe in, because maybe some of the things that they do well we aren't even trying to do. So that might be a different thesis project. Another one would be really focusing in on the staff, learning from the staff. I mean, I've mentioned the graduates and the current students, but maybe the staff have some ideas or some answers that are untapped. Maybe the school leadership is inept. You might not know until you do the work. And then another possible theory would be focusing on the home life of students or the local churches that they attend or don't attend. There'd be lots of places where more information might lead to better answers. Those would be some of my ideas about an investigative thesis project. But let's move on to the second one. What would an experiment thesis project look like? What could you put into action and measure? Yeah, one idea would be either based on maybe you do a little bit of the discovery, and in fact, in a lot of thesis projects, it's not discovery or experiment, it's you do a little bit of discovery so that you can set up the right experiment. And, maybe you don't have to send out tons of surveys or interviews, but just by asking the right people the right questions, you kind of start to get a feeling of what the real problem is. And that hopefully is a nugget you can use in your own thesis project context, is trying to figure out what the issue is and what people are saying about the issue to get a good grasp on it. But an experimental thesis project, maybe it would be putting in a mentorship program. Maybe it'd be overhauling what you do for your Bible education. Maybe it'd be extending chapel, doing away with chapel. Maybe it would be putting into practice some sort of service project element or community outreach. Or maybe it would be putting in a leadership focus in your students. There's a lot of different things you could say are treatments, something you'd want to try to see, can I measure this to see if it makes better graduates? If this leads to greater spiritual formation or maturity? There's a whole bunch of things that you could try. Again, 10 or 12 different thesis projects of implementing something. But can you put your finger on what you believe to be the real issue to make some kind of improvement and to measure with a pre and a post, or in the event that there's multiple things going at once, a comparative analysis? Students who take part in something versus students who don't. I mean, it could be as simple as having a prayer hour every Wednesday before school and measuring the spiritual formation of students who go to this Wednesday prayer gathering at least 75% of the time over the course of the year versus students who don't. Did the students who took part in the prayer group grow more? Well, we would assume so, but I mean, if we can track things like that, then we know where the time should be spent and where the effort should be. So experimental thesis projects would be having a hunch about what would work better and putting it into practice and measuring it. Good. Well, that should round out our second context. Let's move on to number 3.